Welcome, everyone, for this last lesson in our series on the parables of Jesus. Today we start our story with Jesus being invited to one of the Pharisees' homes. Now, his name was Simon. A Pharisee was a man who taught in the temple. He was appointed by God to do the teachings and to enforce the laws and teach the people about them. He was considered to be an honorable man in the community. But many times, the Pharisees thought that they were better than everybody else. They considered themselves very righteous and very religious men. So when Jesus came to the banquet that was to be that night, he came in and sat down with all the other guests. Now, it was the custom in that day that all of the guests had their feet washed because the roads were very, very dusty. And so the host, in this case it would be Simon, had his servants wash the feet of all the guests. However, Jesus did not have his feet washed. Simon was not very well mannered. He was actually very rude to Jesus in not doing this. It was also the custom in that day that the owner of the home or the host would greet each one of the guests with a kiss. Jesus was not greeted with a kiss, another sign of Simon being rude to Jesus. Also, each guest was anointed with oil. The top of their head had a special oil poured on it. This was not done for Jesus. Just another sign that Simon did not have respect for Jesus. And so he was very rude to him. The banquet began, and as they were reclining there at the table, a woman came in from that area who was a sinner. She'd led a very sinful lifestyle. She stood behind Jesus. She knew exactly who he was. And she began to cry, crying tears from the weight of her sin. She did realize who Jesus is, the Son of God, the one who could forgive sins. And as she stood there crying, the tears fell on Jesus' feet. And I'm going to read this part from the Bible. It said, "She brought an alabaster bottle of perfume, and she began to wipe his feet with her hair, and then she dried them, and she kissed his feet and poured perfume on them." Now, she did all of this to show the great appreciation she had for Jesus. She knew that he was the one that forgave her of all of her sins, and she wanted to show her love for Jesus, so she did it in this way. Now, Simon did not understand that, and he was thinking to himself, if Jesus was a true prophet of God, he would know who this sinful woman is, and he would not let this woman anywhere near him. He didn't really understand that Jesus came to save sinners. So Jesus said, "Simon, I have something to tell you." Simon said, "Well, go ahead. Tell me, teacher." He said, there were two men that owed a great deal of money to someone. One man owned 50 denarii. Now, denarii was the kind of money they used in that day. A denarii would be the amount of salary a person could earn at a job in one day. One man owned 50 denarii, and another man owned 500 denarii. Neither one of them could pay it back. And so the man that they owed it to said, "I forgive you of your debt. You don't have to pay it back." Now, that's very surprising. It doesn't happen very often, but it happened to them. They were very appreciative of this. But Jesus said to Simon, now in this parable I just told you, which one loved more? Was it the man that owned 50 denarii and was forgiven, or the one that owed 500 and was forgiven? Simon said, well, it was the one that owed more and was forgiven more. Jesus said, "You have answered correctly." And he turned to the woman and he said to her, "Woman, your sins are forgiven." And he said to Simon, "I came in here and you did not give me water to clean my feet. Yet she has wiped and cleaned my feet with her tears and with her hair." And he said, "Simon, you did not greet me with a kiss. Yet she has not stopped kissing me from the time I sat down." And Simon, you did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with very expensive perfume. She did all this because I have forgiven. He said, she's been forgiven much, and therefore she loves much. Someone who's only been forgiven a little only loves a little. He was trying to show Simon the reason that she was so loving, and show Simon the reason that Simon was not loving. It was because he didn't think he needed forgiveness. He already thought he was righteous. But the Bible tells us no one is righteous, not even one person. And he said to her, your sins are forgiven. Now the crowd started murmuring, talking, and saying, no one forgives sin but God. We know this. And Jesus looked at the woman and he says, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. She knew she was saved. She knew she'd been forgiven, and she was very happy. And Jesus knew that Simon and his other friends who were Pharisees there did not understand. And so Jesus told another parable in another part of Luke. Back in Luke chapter 18, verse 10, there was another parable that Jesus told to try to help the Pharisees understand. And this parable begins with a Pharisee and a tax collector, both coming to the temple. And Jesus said both of them came to the temple to pray. Now, a Pharisee, you know, is a man who teaches the law, as I just told you. He's appointed by God and considered a very honorable person in his community. Now, a tax collector is the opposite. He's not appointed by God, does not teach God's law. And most of the time, tax collectors were known to be very sinful and not honorable at all. So this man knew that he was a sinner. A lot of times they stole from their own people. They charged much more taxes than the person really owed, and then the tax collector would keep that extra money. Basically, a thief in the community. So they both came to the temple to pray, and the Pharisee stood up, Jesus said, and in a loud voice, he stood up and he told God all about himself in his prayer. These are the words that Jesus said. The Pharisee stood up and prayed about himself. God, I thank you that I am not like other men who are robbers and evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector here. He said, I fast twice a week and I give a tenth of all I have. Now he told God all about how wonderful he was. But then Jesus said, the tax collector also bowed himself humbly before the Lord and prayed a very simple prayer. He wouldn't even consider himself worthy enough to look up into heaven. And he said, God, have mercy on me. I'm a sinner. And then Jesus asked a very important question. He said, which one of these men went home satisfied? Which one of them went home with a right relationship with God? Was it the Pharisee who prayed loudly and boldly and almost like he was very, very proud of who he was, not asking for forgiveness? Or was it the tax collector who humbled himself before God and asked for mercy, asked for forgiveness, admitted that he was a sinner? Jesus said, of course, it is this tax collector. He said, I tell you this, for everyone who exalts himself, thinks great of himself and is proud of himself and boasts about himself, will be humbled. But everyone who humbles themselves before the Lord will be exalted. And so he was telling us that we need to be humble. This parable shows that people who pray the loudest and stand up so everyone can see their good deeds might be very far away from God. We must be very careful not to brag and to boast when we do good deeds for people, showing kindness, giving things away, even saying kind things. We must be very humble in what we do. So just when you see a person doing that, don't think that they're so close to God. If they're bragging, they're probably far from God. In order to be very close to God or to come to God, we must humbly admit that we are sinners. And we must stand in need of God, asking Him to forgive us and to give us salvation. There's nothing that we can do to gain that forgiveness by ourselves or to have salvation by ourselves. All of that was done by Jesus Christ when He died on the cross. He did that just for us. Have you come humbly to God and admitted to Him that you're a sinner and need forgiveness? If not, you could do that today. Just bow your head and ask. Thank you for joining me in this series of the Parables for Jesus. I hope that you've learned so much and that God has stirred your heart to move closer toward Him.